Good morning and welcome to the Planning and Placemaking Committee of the 13th of November 2024. I'm Councillor Ian Massey, the convener of the committee, and I'll introduce you to the top table today. And on my far left is Councillor Grant Stewart, my vice convener, Ms Jessica Guild, Democratic Governance Officer, and Mr Jeff Fogg, Legal Manager. And on my right is Mr Christian Smith, Development Management and Building Standards Service Manager, Mr Sean Panton, Team Leader Major Developments, and Mr Paul Williamson, Team Leader Local Developments. And as this is a hybrid meeting, members joining virtually are reminded that if you leave the meeting during consideration of any application, you are unable to participate or vote on that item. Actually, I'm going through this, I'm looking at the screen, there is actually no one online, so I'm not going to go through all that. Okay. Yes, thank you. So I'm sure everyone else in the committee know that to use the chat box to get my attention. Thank you. We move on to item 2, which is declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest. The minutes of the Planning and Placemaking Committee of the 9th of October 2024. Can we agree the content of the minute? Thank you. And we do have deputations. Can I ask the committee if they agree to hear deputations on items 511 and 522? Yeah. And on behalf of the committee, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to the deputations and members of the public watching today. Your request to speak has been granted and you'll be called to the lectern as we reach the relevant item on the agenda and be invited to make your deputations by the vice convener, followed by a period of time for questions from members. If it is requested that the content of your application, deputation, is kept relevant to the planning considerations in relation to the item of business being discussed, please also ensure that when answering questions, your response remains relevant and direct to the questions asked. So we move on to item 511, which is the first application. It's a major application, and it's for a section 42 application to modify condition 1, duration of permission at Greenburn Wind Farm, Bridge of Cally. And to introduce the report is Mr Panton. Thank you.
Thank you, convener, and good morning, councillors. As stated, the first application on the agenda today is a Section 42 application for the consented Greenburn Wind Farm near Bridge of Cally. The parent application for 11 wind turbines was originally granted by the Scottish Government DPEA in February 2018 and had a condition on it limiting the development to a lifespan of 25 years. As technology has improved significantly since the application was originally submitted in 2015, and in line with the recommendations of MPF4, it is now sought to change the condition from a 25-year lifespan to a 40-year lifespan, hence this Section 42 application. Members should note that no public objections were received regarding the amended condition, and the application is only before the committee today as it constitutes a major development. Members should also note that the parent application has been implemented by virtue of the formation of the site access. This therefore means that the parent permission is live and the developer would be able to implement that permission regardless of the outcome today. All we are looking at today is if the development is suitable for 40 years as opposed to 25. I will now take members through a short presentation to detail the proposals further. Here we have the location of the site near Bridge of Cally. You can see the A93 to the west and the existing Drumderg wind farm to the east. Next slide, please. This next plan shows the location of the site in better detail, given its context in the surrounding area. As seen, the site is to the north of Blairgowrie and Rattray, near the A93 road to Glenshee. Next slide, please. We now have a proposed site plan showing the arrangement of the 11 turbines. You can see here that the existing road, shown in yellow, essentially divides the site into 2 sections, with 6 turbines to the north of the road and 5 to the south. Next slide, please. Here we now have a typical elevation of the turbines. Please note that no changes are proposed to the turbine design, which has already been granted. Next slide, please. We now have a photo montage showing the site when viewed from Mount Blair. You can see the 11 turbines in the centre of the shot, with 4 of the existing turbines at Drumderg Wind Farm to the left of the image. Next slide, please. We now have a photograph taken by colleagues of Perth and Kinross Council who visited the site in October 2024. Here we can see the aforementioned new access point, which has been created to accommodate the development and turbine delivery. Next image, please. This next photograph shows the other of the 2 site accesses, which is still to be upgraded. Next image, please. This image shows the access track, which is currently in situ on the site. You can also see the northern section of the site here. Final image, please. This last photograph shows the site looking in an easterly direction. You can just make out the existing Drumderg wind farm on the horizon. Next slide, please. Thank you, convener. That now concludes my presentation. I will leave members with the proposed site plan for reference. I would also remind members that we are only considering the acceptability of the scheme for 40 years now, as opposed to 25, as the rest of the development has been consented. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patton. We do have deputations on this, so I'll now hand over to the Vice Convener.
Thank you, Convener. We have Mr. Grierson, agent to the application. Good morning, Mr. Grierson. You might have to do *6 to unmute.
Yes.
Good morning.
Thank you. Yes.
We can hear you loud and clear.
Marvellous. I've never done it before the phone. Quite interesting. Okay. Right.
You've got 5 minutes, Mr. Grierson. So whenever you're ready with your deputation, please proceed.
Right. It is very short. Well, thank you, convener, and thank you, members of the committee, for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Dan Grierson. I'm a chartered town planner specialising in low carbon generation, and today I'm speaking very briefly in support of this Section 42 application to extend the life. As your officers very comprehensively set out in their report, the proposal seeks to extend the operational life of the wind farm from 25 years to 40 years. This basically reflects the expected life of the wind turbines based on experience elsewhere. Existing sites are, mechanically operating long before the previous common 25-year lifespan. As explained, work to construct the project has commenced, and having spoken to my client this morning, I understand the turbine installation is scheduled to take place in probably from late 2027. Delay has been issues which is under now resolved. Your officer report handling is very comprehensive and very detailed, and I have nothing really more to add to it, although I am here and will be very happy to answer any questions which any members may have. So thank you, convener, and thank you, members of the committee, for your time this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Grierson. Could you give us a moment while members populate the chat function, and can remind members to keep their questions to the time period, not the development as a whole. Thank you. Councillor Waters.
Thank you very much for agreeing to take questions with this. Just in relation to the time span, I think we were in the introduction, we were told that the turbines are exactly the same. When these turbines are manufactured, is there a lifespan on the turbines that from an engineering perspective to allow them to last for 40 years, or is it just anecdotal evidence that tends to be happening elsewhere, so we're going to do it?
It's a combination of both. Turbines which run for 25 years are not at the end of their operational life. At the end of their 25 years, the components are a high standard and do last. Wear and like a car, wear and tear issues like your brakes and bearings can be replaced. So it's not really a mechanical issue; it's a cost issue. There may be a point at which the repair of components or the swapping out of a generator or something starts to sort of become expensive, and the turbine would be removed or replaced. Components are to a high spec. A lot of turbines now are being designed for an offshore environment where consents are typically sort of 30 to 40 years, so they're robust systems. There's been a lot of learning over the last sort of 20, 30 years. These things have been rolled out and deployed, and experience is that they last. You can repair the bits which wear out. Bits wear out over quite a long period of time. And personally, I've been involved in quite a few repowering projects where turbines have come down. Now after 25 years or so, but they haven't been scrapped. They tend to come down, get refurbished, and then reappear somewhere else. Quite a few Scottish islands have second-hand turbines which have been somewhere else, and quite big projects. There's a Nissan car factory northeast of England, quite near to where I am, where the turbines are second-hand, and they've now been there for another 20 years. So these turbines, which are sort of, it's design is probably now 30 years old, are still going strong. I hope that answers your question. Appreciate it was a bit convoluted.
That's great, thank you.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Yeah, this is a section 42 to amend the duration of this application. I'm just a bit confused because the drawings show revised turbine heights. I'm just wondering, is anything else changing apart from the duration of the application?
Only the duration. The only change to the consent is the time which the turbines can operate for. No other changes at all.
Thank you.
Mr. Grierson, there's no further questions, so you're free to go.
Well, thank you for your time. Appreciated. Thank you.
Okay. Convener, there's no further deputations, so I'll hand back to yourself.
Thank you. Can I ask committee if they have got any questions for officers? Bailey Williamson.
It's about conditions 19, 20 and 21, which is around about management of wildlife and doing an audit. Given that the extended lifespan, will a further audit be requested for wildlife and the impact on the environment potentially around that site, or is that no?
Thanks, Councillor Williamson. Yes, so what we've done through this Section 42 application is all these conditions, we've worded them in a way that means prior to any further work being undertaken on the site, they need to do updated survey work and the likes. So we heard from Mr. Grierson they're intending to start construction here in 2027. So before they do that, they'll need to do updated survey work.
Bailey McLaren.
Thank you. My question's in relation to the noise levels, and it's the time period within page 51, section B. Within 21 days from receipt of a written request from the planning authority, if there's a complaint regarding noise or a concern, it has a feeling that this time period of 3 weeks plus may be quite lengthy. Is this just a standard process? Can this be something that we can reduce to 14 days as in the condition?
Lynn, can you take that one?
Really, Claren, it's just a standard, 21 days from the receipt of a written request from the planning. So they have 21 days in which to give the applicant time to find a consultant that can take on the work and do the assessment for them. So it's not deemed unreasonable to allow them 21 days in which to do that. Excuse me. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you. It's the same question for officers, really. Basically, the drawing says it's revised heights, and therefore, has there been any other amendments, or is it just the duration?
I can clarify that for you, Councillor Cuthbert. So when the original application was submitted in 2015, we sought amendments to reduce the height of the turbines, and that's why those drawings say revised turbine heights, because they were revised elevations in 2015, and the drawings are simply carried over to this application. So I can confirm that the only change as part of this application is the duration.
Thank you.
Thank you. Billy McLaren, you have another question?
I do, thank you, Convener. It's with regard to this change in time span, 40 years, and the reinstatement. I'm looking at that reinstatement cost. Would it be prudent to ask for a different commitment, financial commitment towards that, given that we've no idea what that's going to be in 40 years? But currently what it is here today, it will be a lot more.
Thanks, Billy McLaren. So as I'd kind of alluded to in my introduction, MPF4 is now supportive of these types of development for 40 years. So on that basis, it wouldn't be prudent for us to increase our requirements. In terms of site reinstatement, when it comes to a wind farm, there actually isn't too much to reinstate because the footprint of the turbine itself is so small and the access tracks are fairly reversible. So actually, in terms of reinstatement, there isn't that much for the wind farm. So on balance with that and the MPF4 support, I think what we've got now is suffice.
Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Waters.
Thanks. Just looking for a wee bit more information on the habitat management plan, especially in line with the new emphasis within NPF4 on nature and biodiversity. Who monitors this? Who ensures that there is no ongoing damage to nature, and preferably make sure that there's a kind of more a restoration type rather than mitigation aspect to it all?
Thanks, Councillor Waters. So there'll be two people monitoring it. The first would be our monitoring officer within the planning enforcement team. Because this constitutes a major development, we've got a statutory requirement to monitor it. But also within the conditions here, they're required to appoint an independent environmental clerks of works. So they'll be independent to the developer, independent to the council, and they'll monitor adherence there, and they'll report to the council if there is any breach.
That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? No further questions. Can I ask for a motion? Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Convener. Yes, I'm happy to move the paper as it is. As you highlighted on the plan, we already have the Drumderg wind farm in the area, which caused a lot of complaints at the time, but has now become, to some extent, part of the scenery. I know some people still object to it, but this is part of the scenery as electric pylons and telegraph poles. I'm not convinced that these things will be around in 40 years' time, to be honest, with the modern technology and energy sources that are being developed, but I understand they can be removed if they ever become obsolete. So yes, I'm happy to move the paper as is. Another 15 years probably isn't as much on it for most people. If I may, just a footnote, Mr. Panton, when you put your ordnance survey map up, the Bridge of Cali post office was not highlighted sufficiently enough. Should have been illuminated with flashing signs. Thank you, but I'll accept your apology for that one. But yes, I move the paper. Seriously, move the paper.
Thank you. Councillor Allen, you seconding?
I'm happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask if there is any amendment? No amendment. Can I ask if the committee has any comments on the report? No comments at all? Okay, I'll put a wee comment in. I'm pleased that we've decided to allow this to be increased from 25 to 40 years. The benefits of green energy to the environment are huge, and by harnessing the power of the wind, we reduce the reliance on fossil fuels, thereby decreasing greenhouse gases. I think the operation of the Greenburn wind farm will play a crucial role in helping Scotland meet its ambitious climate targets and transition towards a net zero carbon future. Thank you. If there is no other comments, then the application is granted. Thank you. We now move on to item 521, which is a local application, and it's for change of use and alterations to dwelling house to form a two short-term let accommodation units in Pitlochry. And to introduce the report is Mr. Williamson. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Convener. The first local application for consideration today relates to the conversion of a vacant 3-bedroom dwelling house into 2 short-term let properties containing 1 and 2 bedrooms respectively. As noted within the report, the property has been vacant for approximately 5 years, but prior to that, it had also been utilised as staff accommodation for a local hotel for around 15 years, where it had allegedly impacted upon neighbouring residential property, as was highlighted through the submitted objections. As outlined in the report, this application has been referred to committee today in light of the receipt of 9 letters of representation. The matters raised are outlined in paragraph 29 of the report, but largely relate to potential amenity impacts, overlooking and privacy, road safety, impacts on protected species, and the wider need for residential accommodation as opposed to short-term lets. In this instance, while out of the town centre of Pitlochry, due cognizance has been given to the criteria outlined in the non-statutory guidance on short-term lets, and in particular, the criteria for extensive refurbishment of a long-term vacant property. The relationship to existing property remains, and distances associated with privacy would be maintained. Other amenity controls can also be covered via the parallel licence process. As such, the recommendation is one of approval in light of the benefits in refurbishing this traditional and vernacular property to create additional accommodation in this ever-popular tourism destination. I will now take members through a short presentation to detail the proposals further. Here we have the location of the site towards the western edge of Pitlochry, just off the A924 and Legriach Lane. Next slide, please. We now have the proposed site plan showing the arrangement of the site as existing at the top, with 5 car parking spaces shown, and at the bottom a total of 2 spaces each for each of the proposed short-term let units, and an additional 2 spaces shown for the retained dwelling house Legriach Cottage at the southeast corner, which is also in the ownership of the applicant. You can see here that the existing lane is also shared with 2 properties at the site entrance, Craignish and Newark, and also leads southwards to Ronnieval beyond. Next slide, please. This slide shows the first holiday let would comprise a single bedroom with shower room and shared kitchen, living, dining area. The larger east unit would also comprise 2 bedrooms each with ensuite facilities and again a shared kitchen, dining, living space. Externally, the units would have rendered white walls, slate roof and feature timber cladding. We'll now move on to a series of photographs taken by the case officer. Next slide, please. The first image shows the view southwards from the shared access, with Craignish on the left and Newark on the right. The host property is in the centre, with the wider Legriach Bray development beyond. Next slide, please. This next photo shows the host property in closer detail, illustrating its traditional build and appearance. While some trees have been felled within the site, permission was not required to fell them. Notwithstanding, we do have a condition in place to consider boundary treatments and landscaping going forward. Next image, please. This image shows the view eastwards to the neighbouring dwelling Craignish on the left and the garden areas of the short-term let units beside. On the right is the view from Legriach Cottage, which shows the gable end of the host property and some of the car parking arrangements at present. And final image, please. These last photographs show the southern garden ground top left and the view to the rear of one of the modern dwellings on Legriach Bray top right, as well as where the parking for the adjacent cottage would be located. The bottom photo shows Legriach Bray, the applicant's separate property, which does not form part of the application site. Next slide, please. Thank you, Convener. That now concludes my presentation, and I'll leave you with the site plan for reference.
Thank you. We have no deputations on this, so I'll go straight into, does the committee have any questions for officers? Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, convener. Yes, condition 8 basically says that they have to be used as short-term lets. I don't understand why that needs to be in there. And given the shortage of accommodation within Pitlochry, particularly affordable accommodation, I would suggest this shouldn't be in here. Can you give a justification for it?
Generally, in such instances where we are approving accommodation as short-term let usage, we do seek to control it as such, so it isn't necessarily, well, certainly in the case of flats, it couldn't change back anyway, but we would want to have security over how it's being operated going forward, so it wasn't just jumping between short-term lets and dwelling houses.
Bailey Williamson.
Thank you, convener. I think my question is for along a similar line. It's I was wondering if it's possible to get a bit of an explanation of the difference between a residential area zone and a commercial zone, and why, on balance, it was felt appropriate to allow this property to commercialise what is essentially a residential zone.
Thank you, Bailey Williamson. Yes, ordinarily we would be trying to direct short-term let properties to within existing town centres, commercial centres, where there's a bit more of a mix of activity. Obviously, in this instance, as I outlined in the presentation, the non-statutory guidance for short-term lets does outline a number of criteria that we should take into account, and in this instance, properties which have long-term vacancies are one of the criteria that we do look at. Obviously, this one has been in that situation. It's been vacant for over 5 years. It's not been brought forward and refurbished for residential use. Therefore, we've got to consider whether or not this in itself would be acceptable. Clearly, in this instance, the size of properties at 1 and 2 bedrooms are quite small, quite modest. We've got to then consider whether or not they've got the potential to then impact on residential amenity, given the scale of them, obviously liaising with environmental health as well, and given the assurances and practices we have through the parallel licensing process, we would be satisfied that short-term let accommodation in this area wouldn't have a significant difference in amenity impacts as certain dwellings could, for example.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, convener. It's just a general question, really. We've heard quite often from objectors, I know that we don't have any deputations today, about the fact that there's an over provision of holiday lets in the Pitlochry area. When do we consider that we've come to a capacity, and how close to we are we actually to that? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your query. As you'll appreciate, there has been a lot of wider debate and consideration as to whether or not we should be establishing a short-term let control area within Perthshire, and particularly Highland Perthshire. Clearly, the previous decision of members was not to take such a control area forward. That would be the mechanism at which, if the concentrations were at such a level, that we would start viewing that in greater detail.
Thank you. Any further questions? Bailey Williamson.
Yes, I was just wondering if it's possible just to get an explanation of the car parking spaces. I know that the report sets off, I think it was with 4 parking spaces, and we end up with 6 parking spaces. And I was just wondering if we could get some clarity about that, please.
Thanks, Bailey Williamson. Yes, as I alluded to in the report when I was showing the site plan, there are 5 spaces associated with the existing 3-bedroom dwelling house at present. This proposal seeks to provide 2 spaces per short-term let unit, so that's the 4, but there's also a further 2 spaces shown on the plan which identifies the parking associated with Legria Cottage, so that's where the figure of 6 comes from, but it's only 4 for the 2 short-term lets as part of this application.
Councillor Harvey first then.
Okay, thank you, convener. You alluded to it in your presentation, but is there historic instances of antisocial behaviour in the area? I'm assuming that was related to this being used as a hotel staff accommodation. Am I correct in that?
Certainly, yes, that's my understanding, Councillor Harvey. I don't know if Lynn Reid has got any further details of previous complaints that may have come in on that to environmental health.
No, I don't have any knowledge of any complaints with that regards to the existing use or the previous use, sorry, of the building.
Bailey Williamson.
Yeah, final question. It's just about the historic nature of the building and just to try and get an explanation of why the building hasn't been listed or has not been listed, and would that affect what's coming before us today?
Thank you for your query. Certainly, there's no question over the fact that this is a traditional vernacular building. Great example of historic architecture within the wider area. Is it at the levels that would trigger the listing criteria? Potentially not. Obviously, it has had a series of historical use. You know, it isn't listed at present. It's as simple as that. Obviously, what we are keen to establish through both NPF4 policy and LDP policy is to try and be as sustainable in the use of land and buildings as we possibly can. This proposal would meet that criteria by ensuring that the building isn't lost, and then the alterations to it are also of an exceptionally high quality as well. So it meets the council's placemaking criteria too.
Maybe in your second part there, Bailey Williamson, the principle of the use of the property wouldn't be affected whether it was listed or in a conservation area. That's more related to physical alterations rather than the use in itself.
And a little bit extra for that is, it's my understanding for a building to be listed, someone has to apply for it to be listed. So the Scotland, I can't remember what's the name of it now, Historic Scotland, they don't go around listing buildings. Someone has to apply for it to be listed. Okay. Yeah, could be council. Apologies, but my computer seems to have died on me. Oh, okay, no further questions. Then can I ask for a motion? Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I'd like to move for approval of this application, but with condition 8 removed from the conditions list. I don't see the need to make this into or insist that it remains as a holiday let. Should things develop further, then I think the residents should have the right to put them back on the market to allow locals to use the properties.
Okay, do we have a seconder for Councillor Cuthbert's motion?
I'm happy to second.
Okay, right, it's okay then. So, Waters, you've got a point of clarity.
You know, the short-term let is part of the planning process. If you remove that, does this mean that would be getting removed and there would have to be a planning application for it to be a short-term let coming through?
It really wouldn't make it. The description includes short-term let. A short-term let is a sui generis use, so it would require planning permission to revert back to a residential property in any case. It couldn't just, well, we're not using it as a short-term let anymore, so we will use it as a house. That would require planning permission. But of course, the principle of that is likely to be perfectly acceptable to us. It would only be if there were other matters to consider that there may be an issue with that. So it depends on what type of residential use it was proposing. It might be subdivided, it might need to look at garden ground, etc. But removing that condition, which is simply a belt and braces, wouldn't necessarily have any significant impact. But I would just clarify that planning permission would be required to use it for residential properties, because the use that is proposed in its grouping, potentially granted planning permission, is a sui generis use. It could not be used for any other purpose without going through the planning process again.
So removing this clause does nothing. Is that what you're saying? Am I misunderstanding this?
Yes, it's belt and braces.
So we've established that removing the clause has no bearing on the application. and leaving the clause in? If it's left in?
In our opinion, it gives greater clarity on the situation.
Right, Councillor Cuthbert, now that you've heard that, do you want to revise your motion?
No.
No. Okay. Right, can I ask if there's an amendment? Councillor Harvey.
I was first.
Yeah, my amendment would be to accept the paper as is, bearing in mind the comments just made.
Okay, can I have a seconder for that?
I'll happy to say.
I need to get glasses. Okay, we now have a motion and an amendment. Can I ask members if they've got any comment on the report first? Bailey Williamson, you have a comment.
Yeah, I think it's a real shame that elected members did reject the proposal to put in a control zone within Highland Perthshire, and that leads us to where we are at present. I think it would have given officers greater powers to manage the number of short-term lets within tourist areas, but unfortunately we are where we are, and we've just got to suck it, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. Any further comment? No further. Oh, Councillor Watts.
Just very quickly, I don't see the point. You know, this is just, you know, I think having clarity with planning applications is important, and I just fail to understand the motion and what it's really trying to achieve, given that any individual will still have to come back and get planning to turn it into a residential house, which I am not against in the absolute slightest. You know, but having clear clarity within the process is important, and I think it just confuses things. So I will be voting for the amendment.
Thank you. I think it's democracy in action here. Different opinions are allowed to be expressed. Councillor Cuthbert, do you wish to sum up?
Yeah, thank you, convener. I hear the arguments. My point would be that this is a permanent permission, and the law may change. It may change that you can let the short-term lapse, and it no longer becomes an issue, and you can then sell the properties as they are. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. But having a condition in there means they have to reapply or apply to convert them to residential units. And I think given the shortage of residential units in the area, we should make that as easy as possible.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey, do you wish to sum up?
Nothing to add to my previous comments.
Okay, now I will now hand over to Mr. Fogg to confirm the terms of the motion and the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. As we've heard, the motion is by Councillor Cuthbert, which is to approve the application in accordance with the report of handling under deletion of condition 8, which restricts it to short-term holiday letting only, and that motion is seconded by Councillor Braun. The amendment is by Councillor Harvey, seconded by Councillor Bailey McLaren, which is to approve the application in terms of the report of handling without any deletion to the recommended conditions. I'll pass over to my colleague Jess Guild, Committee Officer, to take the roll call vote.
Thank you. Members, when I call your name, please let me know if you're voting for the motion or the amendment. Councillor Allen.
Motion.
Councillor Braun.
Motion.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Motion.
Councillor Harvey.
Amendment.
Councillor Illingworth.
Motion.
Councillor Massey.
Amendment.
Bailey McLaren.
Amendment.
Councillor Stewart.
Amendment.
Councillor Waters.
Amendment.
Bailey Williamson.
Amendment.
Thank you. I have 4 votes for the motion and 6 for the amendment, and therefore the amendment will carry.
Thank you very much. Therefore, planning permission is granted in line with the report of handling. Thank you. Right, we'll move on. Does anybody want to take a 5-minute comfort break? Yeah, okay, we'll take a 5-minute comfort break. Okay then, let's move on then. So we are now on to 522, which is the extension to storage building, A Proctor Installation Limited, A Proctor Group, Industrial Estate, Dunkeld Road, Blairgowrie. And to introduce the report is Mr. Williamson.
Thank you again, convener. Second local application today relates to a 581 square metre extension to an existing business premise located at the western edge of Blairgowrie, just off the Dunkeld Road. The site has been in industrial use for over a century, with the Green Bank Works to the north of the site. It is, however, bound on 3 sides by residential properties, with Dunkeld Road to the north, Lochinblair Gardens to the east, and Greenbank Street and Ann Street to the south. The application has been referred to committee today in light of the receipt of 7 letters of objection to the proposals. As outlined in paragraph 25, they relate largely to potential impacts on visual and residential amenity, noise and air pollution, flood risk, traffic and road safety, and design. As outlined within the report appraisal, the application has followed a submission in 2022, which was refused in light of its scale and size and proximity to the eastern boundary. Since then, the applicant has sought to reduce the scale of the extension accordingly, both in width by 2 metres and also by height, and has also supplemented the application submission with further assessments over daylight and overshadowing, as confirmed in paragraph 39. As a consequence, it's considered that these measures are to a level which would have satisfactory impacts on adjoining residential amenity. While not ideal, the proposal would allow for the economic expansion of the existing business, although in all likelihood would represent the maximum level at which this eastern portion of the site could be developed. Planning Service are also satisfied that a number of matters, including surface water drainage and SUDs, and operational hours can be adequately controlled by condition to allow a positive recommendation to be made. I'll now take members through a short presentation. Next slide, please. Here we have the location of the site towards the western edge of Blairgowrie, just off the A923 Dunkeld Road. To the east of the site is Lochinblair Gardens, a semi-modern development of bungalows and 1.5-storey properties with rendered walls and tiled roofs. Next slide, please. We now have a proposed site plan. This shows the position of the 44.7 by 13 metre extension located on the eastern side of the existing storage building, shown yellow on screen. The extension has been pulled a further 2 metres back from Lochinblair Gardens, thus reducing the overall footprint by around 89.4 square metres. Next slide, please. This slide shows the existing height to ridge of 5.7 metres and the new extension sitting marginally lower at 4.95 metres. It also shows the use of moorland green walls and a goosewing grey profiled sheet roof. Next slide, please. We now have a proposed axonometric plan, which gives a 3D image of the relationship of the extension to the surrounding residential property. It also illustrates the positioning of other domestic buildings, such as garages and conservatories on the adjoining property. And I'll now move to a series of photographs that I took last week. First image shows the view northwards from Greenbank Street, showing a secondary access into the site, which no longer appears to be in use. This illustrates the current separation from the dwellings to the east of the site and the areas of intervening grassed open space. Next image, please. These next photographs show the view from the access lane to Lochinblair Gardens back towards the existing warehouse to be extended, and also the fencing and associated landscaping which exists along parts of the eastern boundary of the site. Next image, please. This image shows the rear garden area of number 17 and the solid vertically timber boarded fence and climbers along parts of the boundary. The rear garden depth is 4.5 metres and the proposed warehouse would be 9.39 metres at its closest point from that boundary. The height of the extension would be 3.8.4 metres to eaves level and 4.9 to roof ridge. This would be 2.1 metres lower to ridge than that refused previously and 1.65 metres lower at eaves level. Next image, please. Next photograph shows the view from within the southern part of the yard towards the rear of number 17 on the right with the visible gable, while number 18 is just beyond with the landscape boundary with a conservatory just visible. Next image, please. This image shows the interior of the existing warehouse, showing the types of insulation materials that are stored on site. Final image, please. These last photographs show the view southwards towards Greenbank Street with the rear of properties and Loch-and-Blair Gardens on the left. The lean-to delivery bay would remain as part of proposals. On the bottom right is a better view along to the approximate line of where the extension would extend to. As already confirmed, it would vary from 7.8 to 9.3 at its closest point, and there would be a separation of 13.4 metres from the gable of the extension to the rear wall of the nearest house, number 17. Next slide, please. Thank you, convener. That now concludes my presentation, and I leave the site plan for reference.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. We do have deputations on this, so I'll now hand over to the vice convener. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. We have deputations on behalf of the applicant. We've got Ms. Proctor and Mr. Roy. Would you like to come forward, submit your deputation? Ms. Proctor is going to give the deputation, and Mr. Roy is going to join her for if there's any questions from members. Ms. Proctor, whenever you're ready, you're aware that you've got 5 minutes. I'll start the clock when you start your deputation.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and thank you to the Planning Committee for allowing me to speak today. That was a thank you to everybody. So my name's Kira Proctor. I'm the owner and managing director of the Proctor Group, and I'll just take a quick minute to give you a little bit of the history of the business, which I feel is important. So I've been running the business now for 15 years. It's been in my family for over 50, based in Blairgowrie, and we provide sustainable building products to the construction sector, not just in Scotland, or it's national and internationally as well, as you probably read in the planning application. So as far reach as, believe it or not, the Antarctic, but Japan, Australia, Europe, North America, we have a lot of partnerships. So we have a lot of care for the local community. Over 60% of our employees went to Blairgowrie High School, and really, you know, our incentive is towards the long-term benefit of local employment and the area. We're also committed to our journey to net zero as a business. So we made a carbon reduction plan, 25% by 2025, which we did 3 years ago, and we're well on course. We've almost achieved it already. And as you'll see, the part of the new building is making sure that we have sustainable and renewable energy as part of that. So we've already retrofitted PV panels on our existing structures, and this new building is also proposed to have that as well. And just lastly, we're very proud of the sort of heritage we have. This new building is really to support the requirement to service and grow our existing customer base in the UK and internationally, and offer the business sustainability and growth for the future. And really, it's integral to my vision of keeping the business in Perthshire, which we're passionate about as a family and as a business as well. So I just wanted to cover quickly how we feel we've really taken on the comments from the planners. As it was already summarised, the initial plan application was refused, and one of the main factors was the detrimental impact on the neighbouring properties, which I understand. So we commissioned an independent surveyor to carry out the daylight and sunlight assessment to BRE standards, and we've actually gone over and above what they've asked for as a minimum with the new submissions. So we feel quite confident that we've addressed some of the concerns there. In terms of the natural heritage and biodiversity, this is also very important to us as a business. We carried out an independent survey with EP Ecology Limited, and they've had no significant findings. But despite that, we've also committed to putting things like, you know, bat box, bird box, hedgehog box. We already have these at our office as well in a different location of Blairgowrie. take into consideration external lighting so that it's not detrimental to the local area, and really retain that existing grass in the area between where hopefully the new building will be and the neighbouring fence. Retain that as a green area. The main part, I guess, is the design and layout. So really, it needs to be subordinate to the existing building in place. So we have taken all the considerations in terms of the surveys that we've carried out. We've reduced the size significantly, and in terms of the cubic volume that our initial application had, it was over 5,000 metres cubed. We're now down to 2,500, so we've almost half the initial requirement that we asked for initially. And I think, all the other surveys that we've taken, topographical, utilities, CCP, drainage tracking, all to BRE standards to identify any potential downfalls or concerns. We think we've taken on board from the planners, local committee, and what we need to do. So, thank you.
Thank you for your deputation. Members, can you populate the chat function if you have any questions for Ms. Proctor, Mr. Roy? Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Yeah, just a quick question. What's the new extension of the building? What will the actually be the use of that building in the present plan? Thanks.
The plan is it's essentially for additional storage. So we have partners that do a lot of our manufacturing for us, and it's just going to be an extension of where we're storing pre-made product.
There appears to be no further questions. You're free to go. Convener, there's no further deputations, so I'll hand back to yourself.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Can I ask members if they've got any questions for officers? Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Convener. Just really want to clarify this question of sunlight. I'm looking at the report here, and I'm not an expert in reading these, but it seems when you look at them, from what I can understand, it's numbers 17 and 18, Lochinblair Gardens, which seem to be the most affected by sunlight. I mean, I just want some clarification how this is measured, and because it does mention in the beginning of the report a 0.8% loss of light. I'm not sure if I read it right, so I'm not an expert. So if you have a little bit of clarification, but it seems when you look at these figures that it's number 17 and number 18 which are the most seriously affected.
Sorry, certainly when it comes to the assessment of the daylight and sunlight assessments, yes, they are complex documents to read. Obviously, we require them to be undertaken to the appropriate standard, which they have been. Obviously, as factors with moving the distance away from the boundary, reducing the eaves and ridge heights significantly. We are looking at the impacts as they would be most affected be during winter months when the sun's obviously a lot lower. The rest of the time it would be fine. But when it comes to actually daylight and impacts on the existing windows of the property, it is really quite low in reality as a consequence of those amendments that the applicant has made to obviously do that. There's no getting away from the fact that those properties have exceptionally small gardens by today's standards which we would struggle to support today. Obviously, so we do need to also take into account that they do have 2 metre high boundaries themselves. Some of it's landscaped, so there's not a tremendous amount of usable space there. But the combination of factors between the scale, the amount of times of the years that any overshadowing would occur, we don't think that it's to a level that would be unacceptable in the scheme of things. Hence the recommendation of approval in this instance.
Thank you.
Could I just supplementary? Sorry, Mr. Williamson, I'll just carry on from this. When we do a lot of cases, we talk about this 25% angle for light coming in. There's no mention of that in any of the paperwork. Is it because commercial doesn't apply, or is it we've not taken the measure?
Sorry, it would apply, but certainly it does not interfere with that. because of the distances involved and also the ground levels.
Thank you. Any further questions? No further. Bailey Williamson.
Yes, thank you. Looking at the conditions within the report, particularly around about wildlife management, the focus seems to be about not getting animals trapped in culverts, etc., which is acceptable. But I understand there's a swift conservation project in Blackgowrie going on at the moment, and would it be appropriate to condition that there are swift boxes maybe attached to the building?
Thank you, Bailey Williamson. Obviously, in that regard, there's also condition 10, which requires the aspects of the specific biodiversity survey and ecological appraisal to be fully adhered to and respected. The difficulty that we would have in respect of trying to condition something unrelated to the application site, it wouldn't actually, meet the requirements for planning conditions in terms of the 6 tests. Therefore, it would be wholly upon the applicant if they wish to extend the measures that they're undertaking to projects more widely in the community, but it's not one that we would condition.
Maybe just a bit of clarification as well. My understanding is that there are particular heights and positions related to swift boxes as well. It's a fairly low swung building that we're looking at here, and I don't think it would meet those criteria, so that the height above the ground for any swift box might not be able to be achieved.
Thank you. Any further questions? No further questions. Can I ask for a motion? Bailey McLaren.
Thank you, convener. Yes, I would like to recommend approval of the application as set out in the paper by our officers. Hopefully I've got a seconder.
Councillor Harvey, you seconding?
Yeah, I'm happy to second.
Do we have any amendment? Amendment from Councillor Braun.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Sorry to say I'm going to move an amendment to refuse. There was a previous application, as we know, and whilst I appreciate the size of the new extension is smaller, this is a residential area surrounded by residential housing. I have a little concern about the effect on some of the properties, particularly those in Lochinblair Gardens. The report on sunlight mentions low impact, but it is still an impact on those houses. And in my mind, we're in a similar situation to the previous application. So looking at the reasons for refusal on that, I would say that pretty much they carry across. Looking at that then would be policy 1A, placemaking policy 1B-C, and policy 7A, business industrial, the Perth and Kinross local development plan. MPF 414, I think it is, does say that buildings should improve the quality of the area, whether urban or rural, regardless of scale. And I think the amenity of the housing around here is such that it will be affected by this construction, and specifically those in Lochinblair Gardens. I don't know if anybody will second me. Oh, somebody's flashed up, but and then we'll go on for the competency.
Thank you. Councillor Allen, you wanted to second?
Having listened carefully, I agree, and I'm happy to second.
Thank you. Can I ask committee if they've got any comments on the report? No comments. Okay, then I will now hand over to Mr. Fogg for the terms of the motion and amendment.
Just to
sum up. Sorry, to apologise.
Sorry, just before you get to that, convener. Apologies, Councillor Braun. I didn't catch in relation to LDP2 policy 1B. Which criteria were you referencing? I just didn't catch it.
Sorry, it's policy 1B-C.
Okay, sorry, I do apologise. Bailey McLaren, do you wish to sum up?
Thank you, convener. I'm content with the after listening to the deputation that the applicant has addressed the concerns of the previous application that was refused and is very much concerned about the local community. And I am, what words are escaping me here? I want commend the approach of the business to maintain their presence within the area of Perthshire and Blairgowrie. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Braun, do you wish to sum up?
Thanks, Amelia. Not much to say really. Just that it's the residential amenity around the area which I think is the important factor. As I said, this is a residential area, and the weight should be in favour of the people who live there. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now hand over to Mr. Fogg to confirm the terms of the motion and amendment.
Thank you, Convener. The motion is by Bailey McLaren, which is to approve the application in accordance with the recommendations in the report of handling. And that motion is seconded by Councillor Harvey. The amendment is by Councillor Braun, which is to refuse the application on the basis that the proposal is not compatible with the residential amenity of the locality and thereby contrary to policies, background policies 1A and 1BC of LDP 2, together also with non-compliance in his contention of National Planning Framework Policy 14. And that amendment is seconded by Councillor Allen.
Thank you. Members, when I call your name, please let me know if you're voting for the motion to approve or the amendment to refuse. Councillor Allen. Councillor Braun.
Amendment.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Motion. Oh, sorry.
Motion.
Councillor Illingworth.
Motion.
Councillor Massey.
Motion.
Bailey McLaren.
Motion.
Councillor Stewart.
Motion.
Councillor Waters.
Motion.
Bailey Williamson.
Motion.
Thank you. I have 8 votes for the motion and 2 for the amendment, and therefore the motion will carry.
Thank you. Therefore, planning permission is granted in line with the report of handling. Thank you. Okay, we can move on to the last item on the agenda today, which is a PAN, and this is for change of use of land to form extension to existing holiday park comprising siting of holiday staff accommodation units, covered event space, classroom, landscaping and associated operational development at Lochte Highland Lodges, Killen. Any comments? Bailey Williamson.
Thank you, Convener. I have a number of comments. Firstly is around consideration of additional light pollution. Secondly, it's around sewage and mitigation to prevent spillages. And I understand that there's significant amounts of blue algae appearing on the side of Loch Tay, and anything that can be done to mitigate against that would be quite welcome. Landscaping, would it be possible to have appropriate trees and visual biodiversity, which take into considering the changing climatic conditions? And finally, as part of the consideration, could attention be given to the potential increase in usage of sporting and leisure activities on Loch Tay and potential impact on residential amenity in the wider area?
Thank you, Bailey Williamson. Any further comments? No further comments. Thank you very much. That winds up today. It's a short agenda today, so thank you everyone for your attendance, and I'll see you in December. Thank you.